The call came at 3 a.m. Not from my brother. From a cop. "Is this the daughter of William Mitchell?" the officer asked. My stomach dropped before he even finished the sentence. He knew. Somehow I already knew something was terribly wrong. "There's been an incident. Your father is." I was already grabbing my keys, my phone, scrambling out of bed. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it might explode. Could barely breathe. Could barely think. All I could do was move. But here's the thing that makes my blood boil even now. My brother had been there. He saw it happen. He was in the house when Dad collapsed. He made the calls. He made all the decisions. He chose the hospital. He spoke to the doctors. He signed the paperwork. And he decided I didn't deserve to know. He decided that in his twisted logic, I didn't have the right to say goodbye to my own father. I didn't have the right to be there. I didn't have the right to hold his hand. I didn't have the right to tell him I loved him one last time. By the time I found out 3 days later, my father was already cremated. Already gone. Already turned into ash. No funeral home viewing. No open casket. No goodbye. My brother had made sure of that. My brother called me like he was telling me about the weather. Like we were discussing a coffee order or a package delivery. "Hey, so something happened with Dad." Something happened. Not like Dad was dead. Not like our father had ceased to exist. Not like my entire world had just collapsed. "He had a heart attack at home," my brother said. His voice completely flat and emotionless. Zero compassion in his tone. "I've already handled everything. The funeral was yesterday. You would have just gotten upset anyway." He said it like I was being irrational. Like my grief was an inconvenience to him. Like my feelings about my own father's death were something he needed to protect people from. The phone almost slipped from my hands. Yesterday. I'd been going about my life completely unaware. Making breakfast. Going to work. Making plans for the weekend. Living my normal life while my father was already buried. While my father's body had already been reduced to ash and placed in an urn somewhere. "Why didn't you call me?" I heard myself screaming. My voice didn't sound like my own. Sounded like an animal in pain. "Why didn't you call me?" My brother sighed. He actually sighed like I was being unreasonable. Like I was overreacting. Like my anger was unjustified. "I knew you'd make it a big deal. I knew you'd cry and be dramatic. I needed to handle this as an adult, not have you falling apart making it about your emotions." He hung up on me while I was screaming. While I was in absolute shock. While I was processing the fact that my father was dead, and I just found out about it from a phone call that lasted less than 2 minutes. "I need you to understand something about my brother. He has been my father's gatekeeper my entire life. Not because Dad wanted him to be. Not because Dad asked him to be. But because my brother took the position and nobody stopped him. Growing up, I watched him slowly, methodically cut me off from our father. It was brilliant in the most evil way possible. He'd tell Dad I was too busy to visit. He'd say I didn't ask about him. He'd mention how I never called. Meanwhile, I was calling every Sunday. I was trying to visit every other weekend. He was just intercepting everything. By the time we were teenagers, I'd given up. I believed what he told me, that Dad didn't really want to see me. I spent 20 years believing my father didn't love me the way he loved my brother. I spent 2 decades thinking there was something fundamentally wrong with me. But I was wrong. So incredibly wrong. Dad loved me. He just couldn't show it because my brother built a wall so high that I couldn't see over it. Here's what really gets me. Dad had been sick for 6 months. 6 full months of declining health. My brother was there every single day, playing the devoted son for everyone to see. Posts on Instagram about being there for Dad. Stories about his sacrifice and devotion. But what I didn't know, what nobody knew except my brother, was that Dad had been asking for me. The hospice nurse told me this later, and it destroyed me. Dad would ask, "Where's my youngest? Why isn't she here?" And my brother would say I was busy, that I was overseas on a business trip. That I didn't care enough to visit. I wasn't overseas. I was 4 miles away, thinking my father hated me. The nurse said Dad cried about it. He cried because he thought I abandoned him. And my brother sat there watching him cry, doing absolutely nothing to correct him. That's the kind of person my brother is. He didn't just keep us apart. He made our father suffer by keeping us apart. So I did what I'd been doing my whole life. I went silent. But this time silence was power. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. Just observed. I watched my brother step into his role as the grieving son. I watched him at the memorial planning meeting making decisions like he was the only one who had the right. And I started asking questions, quietly, carefully, to the right people. Called Uncle Paul first. "So your brother handled all the arrangements," he said, sounding surprised. "That seems fast. Usually families do that together. Did he talk to a lawyer yet?" I asked Aunt Marcy, trying to sound casual. "That's interesting," she said slowly. "I tried to call you about the will, but your brother said you didn't want to be involved. My brother had made decisions affecting my life without asking me. My brother had controlled the narrative so completely that family members thought I was the one choosing to be absent. That's when I found the letters. That's when everything changed. I went to Dad's house without telling anyone. I used the key Dad gave me years ago. The one he'd specifically said was, just for you in case you ever need to come home. I let myself in and the house smelled like Dad. Like his cologne and his coffee and his books. Everything smelled like the person I'd lost. His coffee mug was still in the sink. His reading glasses were on the kitchen counter where he'd left them. His jacket hung by the door like he was about to walk back in at any moment. His slippers were by his bed. I found his desk in the study. The desk where he kept his important documents. Where he kept his will. Where he kept his journals. Volumes and volumes of his thoughts written over decades. And in the bottom drawer, hidden behind old bank statements and tax returns, I found them. 2 envelopes. Both in Dad's handwriting. One had my name on it. One had my brother's name. The one with my brother's name wasn't sealed. He'd opened it. He'd ripped it open and read whatever was inside. And then he'd hidden it under papers like some kind of criminal hiding evidence. I sat in Dad's study for an hour, just holding those envelopes, not opening them, knowing that whatever was inside would either destroy me or save me. There was no middle ground. Finally I opened mine. My father's handwriting filled the page. Not type. Handwritten. Personal. Real. He wrote about the last 6 months of his life. He wrote about asking for me. He wrote about my brother telling him I was too busy to care. "I know what's happening," Dad wrote in the middle of the letter. "I finally figured it out. You've been kept away from me. Your brother has been keeping you away from me on purpose. I'm not stupid. I see the lies now. I see the manipulation. I see how he presents himself as the devoted son while making sure I'm alone." Then Dad wrote something that made me cry so hard I thought I might break. "I finally figured it out too late. I see what your brother has done to you. I see how he's kept you at a distance. I see how he's convinced you that I don't love you. That was all him. I've always loved you. I've always wanted you here. And I'm sorry it took me this long to see what was happening. I should have protected you." I cried in that study alone. 15 years of feeling rejected was all a lie my brother had constructed. Then I opened the second envelope. The one my brother had already read. The letter started with this. "I know what you did." Just that. Not "I think." Not "I suspect." I know. My father detailed everything in this letter. Every lie my brother had told. Every time he'd intercepted a call meant for me. Every time he'd lied about my whereabouts. Dad wrote about watching my brother take money from his account without asking. Dad wrote about my brother meeting with lawyers to change the will without informing anyone. But the worst part, Dad wrote about my brother telling him I had cut off contact with him. That I didn't want to see him. All of it a complete lie. "I've been thinking about this for months," Dad wrote. "I've been watching you. I've been listening to what you say about your sister. I've been comparing it to what I remember. And I've come to a conclusion: you're a liar. You're a manipulator. Then Dad wrote, if you're reading this, you've already done something terrible. Can feel it. I don't trust you anymore. If you hurt your sister, if you keep her from me, if you try to take what belongs to her, this letter will make sure everyone knows who you really are. My brother had read this. He knew Dad had figured him out. And he buried it anyway. I stood in that study, shaking. My brother had read Dad's condemnation. He knew Dad was calling him out. He knew Dad was documenting his betrayal. And he'd buried it. He'd hidden the letter. He'd done the funeral without me knowing. He'd made himself the hero. And he'd done it all knowing that Dad had written down the truth about what he'd done. That's when I made a decision that would change everything. Not an angry decision. Not an impulsive decision. Calm, clear, strategic decision. I wasn't going to confront my brother quietly in some conversation. I wasn't going to let him control the narrative like he always did. I wasn't going to let him rewrite this story. I was going to do something he would never expect from me. Something I'd never done in my entire life. I was going to speak. I was going to tell the truth. I was going to do it where it mattered most. In front of everyone. My brother had planned a celebration of life for Dad. A big memorial service. Not a real funeral where people mourn. A celebration where people remember the good times and tell funny stories. He sent invitations to the entire family. Aunts, uncles, cousins, family, friends. He chose the venue without consulting anyone. He chose the flowers without asking permission. He even wrote the obituary that got published in the newspaper. And he made sure to mention himself prominently throughout all of it. He made sure everyone knew that I wasn't coming. He told people I was too emotional, that I was unstable, that I wasn't close with Dad anyway. He was rewriting the story before I even had a chance to show up. He was painting me as the fragile one, the distant one, the one who didn't care enough to even show up to celebrate Dad's life. He was controlling the narrative before the event even started. But I had already decided. I was going to invite myself to the memorial. I was going to show up. I was going to be heard. I was going to make sure my version of events was told. I was going to reclaim my voice after being silent for so long. I wore a black dress. Formal. Respectful. Elegant. I carried Dad's 2 letters in my bag, close to my heart. I arrived 15 minutes after it started, when everyone was already seated. When my brother was already mid-eulogy. When he was already deep in his performance. When he was telling stories about Dad that conveniently left me out of every memory. When he was presenting himself as the hero of Dad's final days. The moment people saw me walk through the door, the room shifted. The energy changed completely. Whispers started immediately. People nudged each other and pointed. My brother stopped talking mid-sentence. His face went completely white. He went pale like someone had drained all the blood from his body. He knew. He could see the envelopes in my hand, and he knew exactly what was about to happen. He knew his lie was about to be exposed. He knew his version of events was about to be challenged. He knew his narrative was about to fall apart in front of everyone he cared about. I walked to the front of the room slowly. My legs felt like they might give out, but I kept going. My brother tried to keep talking like I wasn't there. And I just want to say that I'm so grateful I could be there for Dad during his final months, being the strong one, making all the hard decisions. Stop, I said. Not loud. Not screaming. Just a clear, firm stop. The room went absolutely silent. I need everyone to hear something. And I need you to hear the truth. My brother stood up. He tried to regain control of the room. Whatever you're about to say is a lie. She's been estranged from Dad for years. She never even. He asked for me every single day, I said calmly. And you told him I didn't care. You told the hospice nurse I was too busy. You kept us apart on purpose. You were isolating him from me. The silence was deafening. It was the kind of silence that happens when people realize they've believed a lie. "This letter," I said, holding up the one from Dad to my brother, "is from Dad. He figured out what you were doing. He knew you were lying. He knew you were taking money from his account. He knew you were meeting with lawyers to change his will. He knew everything. And he wrote it all down." My brother's face turned gray. He started to say something, but Uncle Paul stood up and moved toward him. "Quiet warning. I'll let Dad explain it himself," I continued. I opened the letter and started reading. I read about how my brother had isolated Dad. I read about how he'd lied about me. I read about his scheme. I read about Dad's disappointment in his oldest son. I read it all. By the time I finished, people were crying. Not sad tears. Angry tears. My brother's image, the perfect son, the devoted caretaker, was shattered into pieces that couldn't be reassembled. "You knew this," I said, looking directly at my brother. "You read this letter. You knew Dad was calling you out. You knew Dad understood what you were doing. And you buried it anyway. You hid it. You did the funeral without telling me. You did all of it knowing that Dad had written down the truth about you." My brother tried to leave. He actually stood up and moved toward the back of the room like he could escape. But Aunt Marcy stood up and blocked the door. She put her body between him and the exit. "Sit down," she said. Her voice had steel in it. Real authority. "We're not done." My brother sat back down immediately. For the first time in his life, he wasn't controlling the room. All the control he'd built through manipulation was crumbling right in front of him. Then the estate lawyer walked in. I hadn't called him. He'd made the decision to come on his own because something about the situation had seemed wrong to him. He had Dad's will in his hands. Dad had changed everything. He'd rewritten the will after figuring out what my brother was doing. He'd left me the house. All of it. He'd left me the money, the savings, the investments, everything. He'd left me decision-making power over the entire estate. And most importantly, he'd left a note explaining why. "Because I trust her," the lawyer read. "And I don't trust my oldest son with my legacy. He has shown me who he really is, and I cannot in good conscience leave him in a position of power." The lawyer read it out loud. The entire room heard it. My brother got nothing but Dad's disappointment written for everyone to see. No house, no money, no inheritance, nothing. That's when the confrontations started. Uncle Paul asked about the funeral arrangements. Why wasn't she invited? Why didn't anyone tell her? Aunt Marcy asked about the money. Has he been accessing Dad's accounts without permission? The cousins asked about the will. Did he try to change it? My brother had no answers. Every excuse fell apart the moment he said it. "I was protecting you," he said to me, and I actually laughed. The absurdity was too much. "You were protecting me by lying to our dying father, by making him feel abandoned, by telling him I didn't care." The room went cold. People understood in that moment the depth of what he'd done. They understood that this was about psychological warfare. I looked at the letter again. At Dad's final words to my brother. They haunted my brother. You could see it on his face. They haunted him because they were absolutely true. Dad had figured him out. Dad had called him out in writing. And now everyone else had too. "Dad knew," I said quietly. "He knew exactly what you were doing. And he made sure that when the time came, the truth would come out. He wrote it down. He made it permanent. So I would know his distance from me wasn't because he didn't love me. It was because you were keeping us apart." My brother looked like he'd aged 10 years in 10 minutes. His face was hollow. His eyes were empty. People started leaving after that. Not angry exits. Disappointed exits. People were genuinely disappointed in my brother. People were genuinely hurt that they'd believed his lies. That they'd accepted his narrative without question. That they'd participated in his deception without even knowing it. My brother tried to apologize multiple times. To different people. His voice was shaking. I was trying to protect the family's privacy. I was trying to make it easier. But I cut him off. You were trying to control. And it didn't work. Failed. And now everyone knows exactly what you are. He didn't respond. There was nothing he could say that would change what Dad had written in permanent ink. 3 days after the memorial, my brother's girlfriend showed up at my apartment. She looked scared. She looked like she had something important to tell me. She did. She told me about other people. Other families my brother had manipulated. Other lies. Other situations where he'd tried to control everything. She told me about her own family. How my brother had lied to her parents about her. How he'd tried to keep them apart. How he'd made her doubt whether they loved her. She told me she was ending their relationship. She couldn't be with someone capable of that kind of cruelty. This isn't just about your father, she said. This is who he is. This is a pattern. I understood in that moment. My brother was worse than I'd thought. He was a serial manipulator. Someone with a pattern of abuse. I went to the lawyer's office. I needed to understand exactly what my brother had done. The lawyer explained. My brother had tried to access Dad's accounts after his death. He'd already tried to sell some of Dad's possessions without permission. He'd forged Dad's signature on documents. Your brother committed fraud, the lawyer said. Multiple instances. This could be criminal. Had a choice. I could press charges. I could destroy him completely. I could take everything from him. Part of me wanted to. But then I thought about Dad. My father had exposed the truth. That was his goal. That was his mission. He'd wanted the family to know. He'd wanted me to know. And it had been told. So I made a decision. I would not press charges. I would let the natural consequences be his punishment. That would be worse for someone like my brother anyway. My brother moved away. Literally picked up and left to another state within 2 weeks of the memorial. He quit his job without giving notice. He broke up with his girlfriend over the phone. He cut off contact with almost everyone. He was running from his own reality. He was running from the truth. He was running from the person everyone now knew he was. I heard through mutual relatives that he was struggling. Really struggling. Struggling with work because nobody would hire someone with a reputation like his. Struggling with relationships because people didn't trust him anymore. Struggling with the basic functioning of his life. Struggling with looking at himself in the mirror, knowing that his own father had figured him out and condemned him. Turns out when you lose control, you lose everything. People had only tolerated my brother because they thought he was competent and trustworthy. Once they knew he was a liar and manipulator, once they understood the depth of his deception and cruelty, there was nothing left that made him valuable to them. He'd built his entire identity on being the good son, the responsible one, the one who handled everything. Without that identity, without that power, he was nothing. He was nobody. The ultimate irony. My brother's whole life was built on controlling the narrative. He believed that if he could just control what people believed, he could control reality itself. But he couldn't. The truth came out. Dad's words couldn't be suppressed. Dad's letters couldn't be hidden. And that broke him in a way that nothing else could have. He lost everything that mattered to him in a matter of days. His reputation, his family, his relationships, his identity, all of it gone. I moved into Dad's house. I held on to his possessions. I read his journals, volumes and volumes of his thoughts. I found more letters he'd written, to other family members, to friends, explaining what he'd figured out about my brother. He'd been documenting it all, building a case against his own son. Pages of Dad realizing he'd raised someone capable of tremendous cruelty. Pages of Dad's regret about not protecting me sooner. Pages of Dad's plan to make sure the truth would outlive him. Reading those journals changed me fundamentally. I realized, my father had seen me, really seen me. Not as the daughter my brother had convinced him I was, but as who I actually was. And he'd loved me completely, unconditionally. He'd protected me, even from beyond his death. I started therapy. Real therapy. Not just getting over my father's death, But getting over 15 years of believing a lie about my own father. Getting over the weight of thinking I was unloved. Getting over the manipulation my brother had done to my mind. My therapist said something that stuck with me deeply. Your brother didn't just steal your time with your father. He stole your sense of self-worth. He made you believe you were unlovable. That's a profound kind of abuse. She was right. It was abuse. Psychological manipulation. Cruelty designed and executed over years. And I'd internalized it so deeply that I believed it was true. But Dad's letters proved it wasn't. Dad saw me. Dad loved me. That changed everything for me. It rewired how I saw myself. A year after the memorial service, my brother reached out. He wrote me a letter. Not an email. Not a text. A handwritten letter. Long detailed. An apology. He said he'd been in his own therapy. He'd been confronting his own issues. He said he realized what he'd done was inexcusable. He said he understood why I hated him. He said he didn't expect forgiveness. I read the letter sitting at Dad's kitchen table. The same table where we used to have breakfast together when I was a kid, before my brother had built the wall. The letter showed genuine reflection. It showed actual understanding. Showed remorse. But I felt nothing. Just emptiness where anger used to be. I didn't write back. I didn't call. He was no longer relevant to my life. He was no longer the person I defined myself against. A year and a half after my father's death, I scattered his ashes in his favorite hiking trail. The place we used to go when I was a kid. Before everything got complicated. I brought the letters. I brought his journals. I read passages out loud to the wind. I told him I understood now. I told him I wasn't angry that he'd taken so long to figure out what my brother was doing. I told him I was grateful he loved me, even when he couldn't show it. Then I burned the letters. I didn't need them anymore. The words were already inside me. The truth was already part of my DNA. I kept the journals though. They're his voice. They're proof that he saw me. That he loved me. That he fought for me in the ways he could. People ask me sometimes if I regret what I did. If I regret showing up to that memorial service. If I regret exposing my brother in front of everyone. If I regret reading those letters out loud. And my honest answer is, no. I regret absolutely nothing. My father spent his final months realizing what his oldest son was capable of. My father died carrying the knowledge that he'd raised a manipulator. I spent 15 years believing my father didn't love me because of a lie my brother had constructed. Exposing that lie wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about destroying my brother. It was about truth. It was about honoring my father's final message. It was about breaking free from the narrative my brother had built around me. It was about reclaiming my own story. I inherited the house. I inherited the money. I inherited the journals. But more than that, I inherited my father's courage. His willingness to see what was really happening and to document it so the truth would survive him. And I inherited his love. Real, documented, undeniable love. Written in his own handwriting. My brother taught me what manipulation looks like. How it works. How it destroys people. My father taught me how to survive it. How to find the truth. How to reclaim yourself from someone else's narrative. I did that. I learned those lessons. And now I'm free. Free from the weight of my brother's lies. Free from believing I was unlovable. Free from that shadow. I spent 20 years in my brother's shadow. I won't spend another day like that. I'm stepping into my own light now. I'm writing my own story. I'm defining myself by my father's truth. And I've never looked back.